I would really like to use my time to expand upon, her emphasis on creative thinking and critical thinking as the focus of education. I think we can all agree that the ultimate goal of education is to create a critically thinking being, somebody who is well adjusted to society, who is able to apply his or her mind to the problems that arise in their lives, and to use their creativity to solve those problems. Um, so I think thinking in terms of myths and the metaphors that are used in myths can have a great learning value in making us into critically thinking beings. Uh, for example, when we try to teach literature in today's classes, we find that there is a lack of a common ground between the teacher and the students. Often the students are not aware of the mythical metaphors or the religious metaphors or cultural ideas that we use for pedagogical purposes. So often our teaching sorts of hits a kind of a speed breaker, because we have to take time to explain these metaphors, which are not part of their natural learning process. So often we find that children are ignorant of some of the things that we used to take for granted, because we used to know the mythology of the Bible, or Ramayana or Mahabharata, and those things were readily accessible to teachers as well. So a teacher could easily use a parable from the Bible to teach about a particular moral value, or some story from the Ramayana to teach about sharing or caring or whatever, right? But today we find that these mythologies are not really understood in the classroom. So that is a concern that I would like to put before the panel. uh, Something something to be concerned about in the future, because I think as we are moving into an era of ultra literacy, we are all literate people. We do a lot of reading, writing, talking, but we find that the younger generation is actually doing a lot more of reading than we used to do. Right? They literally spend their life, scrolling through web pages, reading posts, and liking and sharing and things. So they are much more language oriented than probably the previous generation. But yet the language that they use is a different language than the ones that we use for teaching. uh, their metaphors, their mythical infrastructure, so to speak, is definitely not something that we share. So it seems that either there should be a kind of a sea change in pedagogy itself, that we infuse these basic mythical stories into our curriculum, so that when we come to a level of higher education in the college, we have some ground material to work on, perhaps. That is one of the problems that we as college teachers face, that there seems to be a ever widening gap between the lingo of the teacher and the lingo of the students, right? Communication is not really happening. So yeah, so that is one thing that I wanted to talk about. So in connection with this, I'm reminded of some of the ideas put forward by the 18th century British educationist Matthew Arnold, whom we might despise as a Victorian and a colonist, a colonizer. Uh, but still, Matthew Arnold had an idea that in literature there are certain texts, there are certain books which are classics, which are touchstones, so to speak. And just like a touchstone is able to reveal the purity of gold, these literary touchstones, these books, are tools which enable certain everlasting values to be communicated very clearly, right? Certain eternal values, certain fundamental ideas. So he talked of touchstones as being literary works which are relevant irrespective of historical boundaries, right? It might be a book which was written 1,000 years ago, but it's still relevant because it communicates very deep fundamental ideas of what it is to be a human being, right? So I think most of our cultural infrastructure It need not be very well known, epics like Mahabharata or Ramayana. Well, certainly, they are very vast. They are extremely vibrant examples of literature. But even our local legends and folklore, so to speak, is rather, it is not being transmitted to the current generation. Some of the stories that some of the characters that we used to think about as children, probably, even characters like a Yakshi or a Gandharva, or some sort of a supernatural being. These kind of stories are not being understood by this current generation. Neither do these stories have any role in our curriculum. So perhaps as educationists, we could do something about that. That is, one suggestion that I have. Now, coming to the mythologizing of AI, uh, one of the stories that I am reminded of when I think of AI is the myth of the golem, which is from the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalah. Right. The golem is a figure who is created by a Jewish priest in order to protect the community. Right. So it is created from the earth using from clay, and it is infused with a sort of a supernatural life. And the reason why the golem comes to life is because on the forehead of this being, the Jewish priest inscribes the word life uh, on the forehead. And once the golem has served its purpose, the first letter of this word is erased, and then the word becomes death. So from life to death, life and death are both contained in that single word. By erasing the first letter, you turn life into death. So the AI technologies that we encounter every day are like golems. We are sort of creating these uh, mythical beings who are there to help us in our tasks, or we expect them to help us. But as it happens in the story of the golem, sometimes the priest is not able to erase this letter. Sometimes the golem is not no longer under their control, and the golem goes amok. Right, it runs amok. It creates chaos. It creates panic. So we have to think about the kind of mythical beasts that we are seeing emerging in our own lifetime. This AI, creature, and we will soon enter into a kind of a situation where instead of real poets, instead of real storytellers, instead of real artists, we have AI creating these artistic works. And it is soon going to be impossible to tell apart something which is created by a human from some artwork which is created by an AI. We are already seeing that happening. Um, Perhaps AI will even creep into the educational sphere. We will have AI teachers teaching, all these pedagogical tools and lessons to our children. Um, so it bears a lot of thinking. That is what I would like to convey. It bears a lot of thinking about the consequences of artificial intelligence, and perhaps infusing more mythology might be able, we might be able to sort of ground our children into a reality which is not entirely technologically mediated, which is not mediated entirely through a world of mobile phones and scrolling screens and likes and shares and all those things. Perhaps in